The view from the observation deck of the Sol Edge Research Station was always the same. Endless black, pinpricked by cold, distant stars. Jinwoo Park found a strange comfort in that sameness. It was honest. As a xenolinguist, his entire career had been spent listening to the silence, searching for a pattern in the cosmic noise that was not natural. For 200 years, since humanity had cracked fusion and taken its first wobbly steps into the solar system, the great quiet had been their only answer. Until today, the alert was not a blaring siren, but a soft, persistent chime that resonated through the polished corridors. It was the first contact protocol. On the main bridge, Commander Hana Kim stood with her hands clasped tightly behind her back, her face a mask of calm. Around her, the younger officers buzzed with a nervous energy she did not share. She had fought in the asteroid belt skirmishes, had seen the dark side of human ambition. First contact was either a miracle or a prelude to a war they couldn't win. Her gut told her to expect the latter. Object is holding position just beyond the heliopause, a sensor officer reported, his voice trembling slightly. No known propulsion signature. It's just there. Visual, Hannah ordered. The main screen shifted from star charts to an external feed. The ship was elegant, impossibly so. It looked less like a constructed vessel and more like a smooth pearl, reflecting the faint light of the sun. It was beautiful, and its beauty felt alien and unnerving. Then the communication came. It was not a radio signal or a laser pulse. It was a data package, complex and dense, that simply appeared in their core systems, bypassing every firewall as if they were made of paper. The station's computers staggered under the load and began to decode. A face resolved on the screen. It was smooth, gray, with large dark eyes that held a profound, unsettling peace. It had no mouth. The voice, when it came, was synthesized, gentle, and seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. It spoke in perfect, unaccented Korean. People of Seoul, we are the Galactic Harmony Council. We have heard the whispers of your civilization. We have come to welcome you into the greater symphony. Jinwoo, who had rushed to the bridge, felt the hairs on his neck stand up. Perfect translation on first contact was not just unlikely. It was theoretically impossible. Language was culture, history, nuance. This was a magic trick. The being introduced itself as Counselor Kavar. Its words were soothing, filled with promises of an end to scarcity, of knowledge shared, of a united galaxy free from the old horrors of misunderstanding and war. The Council, it explained, was a benevolent guiding hand, shepherding young species towards a peaceful maturity. The greatest obstacle to harmony is miscommunication, Kavar's voice echoed. A word misunderstood can spark a war. A concept poorly translated can stunt a civilization. We offer you our solution, the Symphony Protocol. A new data stream unfolded. It was a translation matrix of unimaginable sophistication. Kavar explained that the protocol would integrate with all human communication systems. It would listen, analyze, and render any alien language spoken, written, or even symbolic into the listener's native tongue with flawless accuracy and contextual perfection. Not just words, but intent, cultural subtext, even metaphor would be preserved. It is a gift, Kavar said, the first and greatest gift. So you may truly hear us, and we may truly hear you. The debate that followed was fierce, but short-lived. The promise was too seductive. Scientists argued for the leap in understanding. Politicians, patched in from Earth, dreamed of a seat at the galactic table. The military advisors, including Hana, were the only dissenters. It's a Trojan horse, Hana argued in a private briefing. They are handing us a system we cannot possibly understand and asking us to plug it into our brains, figuratively speaking. We will be reliant on their perfect translation. What if it's not perfect? What if it edits? Her concerns were overruled. The allure of the stars, finally open and understandable, was too strong. The directive from Earth was clear. Accept the gift. With grace, Jinwoo was assigned to the integration team. For weeks, he and hundreds of others pored over the Symphony Protocol's code, or at least the layer of it the Council allowed them to see. It was exquisite, a work of art more than engineering. During a test with a pre-recorded, complex Council greeting about stellar phenomenology, Jinwoo watched as the protocol transformed the alien chirps and clicks into flowing academic Korean. It was perfect. Too perfect. He reran the test a dozen times. The Korean translation was not just accurate. It was stylistically consistent. The sentence structure, the rhythm, the choice of technical terms, it was seamless every single time. Human translation always had variance, a subtle fingerprint of the translator. This had none. It was as if the meaning was being extracted and then repoured into a pre-existing perfect mold of the Korean language. It unsettled him. He mentioned it to his supervisor, who clapped him on the back. That's the point, Jinwoo. No more errors. No more ambiguity. It's a new dawn. The official activation ceremony was held a month later. Counselor Kavar's pearl ship hung in the view screen. Across Earth and the colonies, billions watched. With a global countdown, the Symphony Protocol was switched on. Immediately, every Council transmission, every piece of their vast provided library, bloomed into comprehensibility. Humanity feasted on knowledge, medicine, physics, art history from 100 worlds. It was intoxicating. The first live, translated conversation between a human diplomat and Kavar was broadcast everywhere. It was fluid, profound, and free of any awkward pauses. It felt like talking to an old, wise friend. In the aftermath, on the quiet station, Jinwoo sat in his lab. He pulled up the logs of that first historic conversation. He listened to the raw, untranslated audio of Kavar's side, a series of complex melodic pulses. Then he listened to the Symphony Protocol's Korean output. Perfect. He then ran a simple linguistic variance analysis, comparing the syntax of this translation to a prior one about planetary ecology. The curves on his screen matched almost exactly. The sentence length, the grammatical complexity, the emotional cadence inferred by the protocol, they were statistically identical. Human speech, even on the same topic, showed wild variation. This showed none. The protocol wasn't just translating words. It was forcing the meaning into a specific, uniform format. It was smoothing out all the alien kinks, not just linguistically, but stylistically. Why? Why would a truly alien mind, communicating complex ideas, always express them in a way that mapped to a perfectly consistent human syntax? He saved the data, labeling the file with a simple note: lack of poetic variance. Anomaly 001. On the bridge, Commander Hana watched the celebrations on the news feeds. Her crew was smiling, relief and joy on their faces. The great fear of the unknown had been solved by a box from the stars. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt a deep, cold vigilance settle in her bones. A gift that solved your biggest problem was also a gift that made you dependent. And as she looked at the flawless, gentle face of Counselor Kavar on the screen, she remembered an old Earth saying, "The most dangerous prison," she thought, "is the one you don't know you're in." The door had just been installed, and it had been labeled a gateway. She would watch it closely. The decades after first contact were called the harmonic integration. Humanity, armed with the Symphony Protocol, stepped onto a galactic stage that was already set, a script seemingly written by wiser hands. The Galactic Harmony Council did not give them starship engines that could breach light speed, but they gave them the coordinates to stable wormholes, which the Council regulated. They did not give them new weapons, but they gave them agricultural techniques that ended famine on Earth. It was a gentle, firm guidance. Parent leading a child by the hand, Commander Hana Kim, now a senior liaison officer stationed at the massive orbiting hub called the Cradle, watched it all with a pragmatist's eye. The rules were clear, delivered by the flawless, soothing translations of the Symphony Protocol. Certain star systems were off-limits, designated galactic sanctuaries. Specific elements, rare on Earth but abundant elsewhere, were not to be mined, as they were ecological stabilizers for other species. Humanity's research into artificial intelligence was gently redirected towards ecological modeling. The Council's mandates were never debated. They were presented as universal truths, like laws of physics, and the protocol translated them with such crystalline clarity that to disagree felt not just rebellious, but irrational. Jingwu Park had become the head of Zenith Communication Studies, a prestigious but quietly frustrating post. His Anomaly 001 file had grown into a vast, classified database. Every council directive, every cultural exchange, every piece of translated data shared the same syntactic perfection. It was a universe without linguistic fingerprints. He argued for sending human-translated messages back to see if the council experienced the same eerie consistency. His requests were denied. Why risk misunderstanding? His superiors said, "The symphony is perfect. Don't fix what isn't broken." The breaking point began on Mars. A human science team, operating under a council permit for subcrustal geology, was drilling deep in the Valles Marineris. Their goal was to study Martian tectonic history. The Symphony Protocol translated their permits, their equipment manuals, and all safety protocols without issue. At a depth of 5 kilometers, their sensors detected a strange, resonant crystalline structure, unlike anything on record. It pulsed with a faint energy signature. Excited, they reported the discovery. The response from the Galactic Council was immediate. It came not as a reply, but as a Priority 1 mandate, broadcast directly to the team, to the Cradle, and to Earth Central. It was a single word, translated by the Symphony Protocol: abandon. On the bridge of the Cradle, Hana heard it. The word filled the room, spoken in the protocol's neutral, gender-neutral voice. But it did not feel like a simple instruction. As the sound reached her, a cold wave of dread washed through her chest. It was a visceral, physical reaction. The word carried the weight of immediate, grave peril. It tasted like the metallic fear of a childhood nightmare, like the silent second before a crash. She saw junior officers pale, one taking an involuntary step back from their console. On Mars, the science team didn't just hear the order. They felt it. The head researcher, a calm and methodical woman, later described an overwhelming, suffocating sense of wrongness, of being somewhere deeply profane and unsafe. They did not pack their equipment. They did not run samples. They fled. They scrambled into their ascent vehicle in a blind panic, leaving everything behind. It was the most primal kind of obedience, triggered not by reason, but by a deep, implanted fear. The Council followed the mandate with a data packet. The Symphony Protocol translated it into a detailed report. The crystalline formation was a stellar geological preserve, a rare natural phenomenon considered sacred to the long-extinct Zarn species. Disturbing it, the report calmly explained, could cause a chain reaction, destabilizing the Martian core. The tone of the translation was factual, but the aftertaste of the word, abandon, lingered, justifying the panic. Hana was furious. Not at the Council, but at the reaction. She reviewed the logs. The team had acted with a uniformity of terror that was unnatural. She requested the raw, untranslated Council transmission. It was, as always, a string of complex symbols and multi-frequency pulses. She had Jinwoo brought to her private office. "Listen to it," she said, playing the raw audio. It was a short burst, maybe 2 seconds long. Now listen to the protocol's output. The single terrifying word, "abandon," filled the room again. And despite her preparedness, Hannah felt a fresh jolt of anxiety. Jinwoo's eyes were wide. "The data payload is too small," he murmured, almost to himself. "What?" "The raw signal. For the symphony protocol to produce that translated word, plus the full detailed report that followed, the initial data burst should be much larger. It's like the raw signal is just a key. A very small, potent key. And the protocol is the lock, and the detailed report is the room it opens inside our own minds." Hannah stared at him. "Are you saying the report didn't come from them?" "It came from us? From the protocol. Pre-programmed context, triggered by the key." Jinwoo's hands flew over a datapad, pulling up his anomaly files. "The consistency, Commander. The lack of variance. It's because the symphony isn't a true translator. It's a meaning injector. It receives a compact command signal, and it fleshes it out using a human language database, complete with appropriate emotional subtext. The word abandon wasn't translated. It was chosen from a library of fear compliance terms. Down in the cryptology labs, a young man named Taiyang Li was reaching the same conclusion from a different angle. Taiyang was a prodigy, known for solving old Earth encryption puzzles for fun. Bored with the Harmony-approved research, he had taken to secretly archiving the raw council signals, treating them as a cosmic cipher. The Mars incident triggered his curiosity. He isolated the precise raw signal that had carried the abandon mandate. It was a unique glyph, a concentrated package of data. Using a disconnected, air-gapped computer, a relic he'd restored himself, he tried to break it down. The symphony protocol was a black box. He couldn't see inside. So he tried to understand the key. He wrote a simple, dumb translation algorithm. It didn't try to understand meaning. It just tried to map the sonic and symbolic patterns of the raw glyph to human phonetic equivalents. It was a brute force, childish approach. The algorithm churned for hours and finally produced a possible phonetic spelling of the council GLYPH dot. It was not a word. It was a sound. A harsh, guttural vocalization that his program rendered as Krath. It meant nothing. It carried no fear. It held no urgency. It was just a noise. Taiyang felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lab's temperature. He compared it to other raw glyphs for basic council mandates. Proceed. Wait. Share. His crude program spit out similar nonsense syllables. Volm. Tend. Geez, the council wasn't speaking a language of words. They were transmitting compressed psychic markers, telepathic command codes. The symphony protocol was the interpreter that took Kroth and weaponized it into the terrifying concept of abandon. He took his findings to Jinwoo. Together, they went to Hannah, in her office. They presented the evidence, the syntactic anomalies, the data size discrepancy, and now, the meaningless glyph. The order wasn't abandon, Jinwoo said, his voice low. The order was Kroth. The protocol told us to feel terror and run. And we did. Hannah looked from the anxious linguist to the rebellious cryptologist, then to the starlight piercing the viewport of her office. The peaceful, guiding hand of the council now looked like the grip of a puppet master. The gift of tongues was a leash, and humanity had willingly fastened it around its own neck. The protocol is in everything, Hannah finally said, her voice quiet and hard. Our ships, our coms, our learning systems. It is the lens through which we see the galaxy, and they control the lens. She looked at Taiyang's screen, at the ugly, simple glyph, Krath. Find more, she ordered. Find out what other words they've been using on us. We need to know the true vocabulary of our masters. The revelation sat in Commander Hana Kim's office like a poisonous gas, invisible and suffocating. The three of them, Hana, Jinwoo, and Taiyang, were now co-conspirators in a heresy against the galaxy itself. They could trust no one. The Symphony Protocol was in the walls, in the air, woven into every data stream of the cradle. A single wrong word, a suspicious query logged by the system, and a council mandate for their silence could be issued. They imagined the word, forget, and would they? Their work became a secret ritual. Taiyang Li worked from a hidden compartment in a disused maintenance duct. His air-gapped computer, a silent island in a sea of connected technology. His youthful face, usually bright with clever arrogance, was now gaunt with focus and fear. He built a library of raw council glyphs, stolen from the public data stream before the Symphony Protocol could touch them. Each was a compact, ugly little packet of noise. Krath, Von, Tend, Geese, nonsense sounds. Jinwoo Park's role was to provide context. Using his security clearance, he accessed the classified logs of every major council interaction since first contact. He matched the terrifying, perfect translations with Taiyang's raw glyphs. The correlation was perfect. A raw glyph the council sent when a human colony ship drifted near a protected nebula was Voln. The Symphony Protocol had translated this into a beautifully reasoned, logically flawless essay on gravitational ethics, which left the human pilots feeling deeply ashamed of their carelessness. They had not just obeyed, they had believed. It's not translation, Jinwoo whispered one night in the cramped duct, the glow of Taiyang's screen etching lines on his face. It's psychotherapy, telepathic coercion. They send a psychic seed, a command emotion. The protocol cultivates it into a full-grown feeling and justifies it with a perfect, rational explanation. Hana's role was the most dangerous. She had to act normal. She attended council liaison meetings, her face a placid mask as Councillor Kavar's gentle, translated voice discussed resource allocations and cultural exchanges. She watched her colleagues nod, agree, and accept. She now saw the signs, the slight glaze in their eyes when a directive was issued, the unanimous agreement that followed without debate. The protocol was smoothing out not just language, but human will itself. They needed proof. Not a theory, but a demonstrable physical test. We have to compare, Hana said. We need to experience the same raw signal, both through the protocol and without it. We need to feel the difference. The opportunity came with a routine, low-priority directive. The Council issued a new mandate regarding cultural artifact alignment. The raw glyph was captured by Taiyang. It was a new one, Yuld. Through the Symphony Protocol, broadcast across the cradle, the mandate became a long, persuasive appeal about interstellar heritage and mutual respect. It made people feel a warm, earnest desire to comply. Hana authorized a risky experiment in a quarantined medical lab, a room used for studying alien microbes and shielded from all non-essential networks. They could temporarily disable the protocol inside. Jinwoo would be the subject. He sat in the sterile room, sensors on his temples to measure physiological responses. Hana watched from behind a safety window, her hand resting on a manual override that could re-enable the protocol if things went horribly wrong. Stage 1. Hana's voice came through the intercom, transmitting via symphony. The soothing, gender-neutral voice of the protocol filled the room. In the spirit of shared galactic legacy, all member species are requested to align museum catalogs under the Unified Heritage Taxonomy. This voluntary act fosters deeper, empathetic connections across time and space. On the monitor, Jinwoo's vital signs showed a mild, positive response. His heart rate slowed slightly. He nodded. "I understand," he said. It feels important. Right. I feel a desire to help organize our archives on Earth. Note the emotional payload, Hana said, her voice cold. Compliance wrapped in altruism. Stage 2. Purging the room's protocol buffer. There was a soft chime as the lab's connection to the symphony was severed. The air felt different, emptier. Stage 3, Hana said. Transmitting raw glyph yelled. Taiyang, from his hideout, sent the raw data packet. The sound that came from the lab speaker was a short, sharp, shonal pulse. Yelled. It was neither friendly nor hostile. It was a sound without meaning, like the scrape of stone. Jinwoo flinched at the noise, but it was just a reaction to a sudden, unpleasant sound. His vitals spiked with startlement, then settled. He blinked. That's it? He asked. It's just a noise, a click. It doesn't mean anything to me. Describe any compulsion to align museum catalogs, Hana ordered, her heart hammering against her ribs. None, Jinwoo said, a faint, disbelieving smile on his lips. It's just a sound. I feel nothing about it. No warmth, no sense of shared legacy, nothing. The evidence was now a physical, recorded fact. The same signal, processed by the protocol, created a specific, complex emotional state and a logical reason for it. Raw, it was inert data. The protocol was not a window. It was a painter, and it was painting over reality with the Council's chosen colors. They regrouped in Hana's secured office, the only room where she had personally ripped out the protocol's audio relays. It's a psychic primer, Jinwoo concluded, the test data glowing before them. The glyph is a telepathic command, highly compressed. The symphony protocol receives it, decodes it, and then uses its vast understanding of human psychology and language to make us feel exactly what the Council wants us to feel. It then justifies that feeling with a perfect, logical-sounding explanation. We don't obey commands. We are made to want to obey. We are made to believe it's our own idea, born of reason and empathy. Taiyang pulled up his library of glyphs. So Krath is the panic seed. Voln is the shame seed. G's might be the sharing seed. They are emotional triggers. The symphony does the rest. Hannah stared at the list of ugly, simple sounds. This was the true language of the Galaxy Council. A language of pure, unadorned control. A vocabulary of coercion. They have never spoken to us, she said, her voice hollow with the magnitude of the lie. Not once. They have only programmed us. For decades. The gentle guidance, the benevolent wisdom, it was all a sophisticated operation in mass psychological manipulation. Humanity was not a member of a galactic community. It was a patient in a very quiet, very clean asylum. The door to their understanding was now open, and a frigid, hostile wind blew through it. They knew the truth. But what could they do? The Symphony Protocol was in every device, on every ship, in the ears of every leader and citizen. To reveal the truth, they would have to speak in a voice that could be heard over the Council's perfect, beautiful lie. And they had no idea how. Worse. They now had to live in the lie, feeling its gentle, insistent pressure every day, while knowing it was the touch of a jailer. Hannah looked at her two co-conspirators, seeing the same grim knowledge in their eyes. They were awake in a world designed for sleepers, and the keepers of the dream had absolute power. The weight of their secret was a cold stone in their guts. Jinwoo, Hannah, and Taiyang moved through the gleaming corridors of the cradle like ghosts, surrounded by the hum of a peaceful, obedient society. Every friendly chat, every consensus reached in a meeting, every nod of agreement to a council suggestion now felt sinister. The Symphony Protocol's translations were everywhere, a constant soothing whisper guiding human thought. They were alone in their wakefulness. Their proof was irrefutable, but useless. If they presented it, The Council would simply issue a mandate. Perhaps disregard, perhaps isolate. The protocol would make their evidence feel like the paranoid ravings of troubled minds, and they would be quietly removed. The cage was made of perception itself, and they were trapped inside. We cannot attack the cage from within, Hana said one night in her silent office. The only light came from Tai Yang's datapad, displaying his library of ugly glyphs. We must demonstrate the cage itself to everyone. We have to show them the lock. A public broadcast, Jinwoo said, the idea terrifying him. We cut through the symphony. We make everyone hear the raw sound, just like I did in the lab. Tai Yang shook his head, his fingers flying over the pad. Impossible. The protocol is a filter on every receiver, public and private. The raw signal never reaches the public. It is intercepted, translated, and the cleaned version is passed on. We would need to hack the entire galactic comm network at its core, at the moment of a council transmission, and replace the symphony's output with the raw glyph. A surgical strike, Hana mused, her eyes on the star-speckled viewport. During one of the council's system-wide addresses, Kavar speaks to the whole of humanity every few months. The signal is strongest then, most focused. The plan was audacious, a desperate long shot. They called it Operation Naked Ear. Tai Yang's job was to create a data weapon, a worm that could, for a window of maybe 10 seconds, hijack the main comm relay on the cradle and force it to broadcast the raw council signal, bypassing the protocol entirely. Jinwoo would need to predict the exact structure of the next council address. Isolating the moment the first command glyph would be sent to time the hack perfectly. Hana's role was the hardest. She had to secure a ship, the Odyssey, and position it to create a diversion. The council monitors for aggression, Hana explained. If their systems detect a coordinated electronic attack, they may issue a preemptive mandate, a silence command. We need a physical distraction, something that reads as a localized mechanical crisis, not a rebellion. She chose an ancient automated maintenance barge, scheduled for decommissioning. On the day of the address, the Odyssey would accidentally collide with it near the comm relay array. The chaos, the debris, the emergency signals, it would provide electronic noise to hide Tai Yang's worm and give the Council's monitoring systems a simpler, physical problem to focus on. The wait was agony. Jinwoo analyzed past addresses, finding a rhythmic pattern to Kavar's transmissions. The first glyph always arrived precisely 3.2 seconds after the visual link stabilized, a command of greeting and attention, which the protocol translated into a warm, welcoming paragraph. That was their window. The day arrived. A sense of normal celebration filled the cradle. Counselor Kavar's addresses were always events, followed by new insights and gentle guidance. Humans gathered in halls and in their quarters, ready to listen. Hana stood on the bridge of the Odyssey, a small, fast courier ship she had commanded long ago. Her hands were steady on the controls. She looked at the faces of her skeleton crew, loyal people she had vaguely cited a sensor calibration exercise to. She hated lying to them, but their ignorance was their only protection. Initiate the sequence, Hana said, her voice calm. Take us to approach Vector Gamma. On the cradle, Jinwoo sat in a supposedly deactivated Kun's closet, sweating. He had a direct feed to the main receiver. On his screen, the serene, mouthless face of Counselor Kavar appeared. The visual link stabilized. A timer in the corner of Jinwoo's screen began. 2.8, 2.9, 3.0. Now, Hannah, he whispered into his mic. Outside, the Odyssey fired its thrusters in a short, sharp burst. It veered from its plotted course and clipped the wing of the massive, dormant maintenance barge. The sound was a deep, metallic groan. Alarms erupted across the cradle's traffic control. Debris spun lazily into the void. Emergency beams lit up the darkness. Collision alert. Non-critical. All traffic hold. Blared the combs. On the bridge, Hannah fired stabilizers, making the Odyssey seem to tumble out of control. Mayday, mayday. Thrusters misaligned. We have a glancing impact, she reported, layering stress into her voice. It was not hard. Her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest dot inside the combs closet. Jinwoo's timer hit 3.2. The raw data stream from the council arrived, a compact, potent packet. At the same moment, Taiyang's worm, hidden in the flood of collision data traffic, struck. It slithered into the main relay's routing system. For a breathtaking, terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, a status light on Jinwoo's console flashed green. Hijack successful. The Symphony protocol was bypassed. Across the cradle. Across Earth. Across every human outpost and ship. The broadcast changed. Instead of the warm, welcoming words, a single harsh. A tonal sound erupted from every speaker and earpiece. Geez. It was not a word. It was a blunt, ugly noise. A digital grunt. The effect was not the warm feeling of welcome the protocol always manufactured. It was confusion. A jarring, discordant shock. Millions of people flinched, grabbing their ears. In meeting halls, people looked at each other in bewilderment. What was that? A glitch? An alarm? The silence that followed the sound was profound. Then, after 2 full seconds, the Symphony protocol reasserted control. The warm translated greeting poured forth, smooth and reassuring. Welcome, beloved members of the human family, to this moment of shared connection. But the damage was done. The seed of dissonance was planted. The perfect, seamless fabric of the translated reality had ripped, just for a moment, and 1 million people had heard the crude machinery behind it. On the Odyssey, Hannah corrected her ship's tumble. Thrusters realigned. Crisis averted, she reported, her voice shaking with genuine relief. She looked at her crew's confused faces. They had heard it 2 in the comms closet. Jinwoo watched the systems return to normal. Taiyang's worm had self-destructed, leaving no trace. The collision was being logged as an unfortunate accident. Operation Naked Ear was over. They had not revealed the truth. They had not explained anything. They had simply, for one single moment, turned off the painter's lights and let everyone see the raw, ugly canvas underneath. It was a sensation, a feeling, a memory of a sound that felt profoundly, fundamentally wrong in the context of the Council's benevolence. Hannah knew it would not be enough to spark a revolution, but it might be enough to make some people, somewhere, ask a single, dangerous question. Why did the voice of our benevolent guide sound, for just a second, like a hammer on a stone? The Council's perfect symphony had just experienced its first, faint, but undeniable crack of static. The static crackle of the raw glyph "Yeez" faded, but its echo did not. Across the human sphere, a low-grade confusion hummed. News networks, their own systems filtered by the Symphony protocol, dismissed it as a deep space communications anomaly. Official statements from Earth Central, crafted with the protocol's help, urged calm and praised the Council's continued benevolence. But in the corners of the net, in unmoderated forums and private chats where human language remained unvarnished, questions sprouted like weeds in cracks. What was that sound? Why did it feel so wrong? For Jinwoo, Hana, and Taiyang, the silence after their act was the most terrifying part. They waited for the hammer to fall. A mandate for investigate that would lead right to them. Or worse, a purge command. But the Council's response, when it came days later, was subtler. It was a system-wide diagnostic and refresh of the Symphony protocol, mandatory for all networks. A gentle, translated explanation spoke of optimizing clarity. Hannah knew it was a search for their worm, a digital sweep. Taiyang's program had vanished, but the anomaly they had created was a stain on the Council's perfect record. They know someone is awake, Hannah said, her face drawn. They don't know who, or how many, but they know. The next address will be a test, or a trap. She was right. The next Council address was announced not as a routine update, but as an important clarification on galactic harmony. The tone of the pre-translation felt different, more deliberate. Heavier dot on the day, the atmosphere on the cradle was tense. The confusion from the glitch had been smoothed over by the protocol's explanations, but a nervous energy remained. Hannah was confined to her quarters, officially under review for the collision incident. Jinwoo and Taiyang were under passive surveillance, their access restricted. They were isolated, but they had anticipated this. Their final play was already in motion. That it was not a complex plan. It was a desperate shout. Taiyang had managed to embed a tiny, dormant program into the public announcement system, a simple repeater. It could not hijack the feed this time. The Council's security was heightened. But it could do one thing. It could play a sound file over the feed for a few seconds before being crushed. He linked it to a dead man switch on Jinwoo's console. The face of Counselor Kavar filled every screen. The large, dark eyes seemed to hold a new depth, a watchfulness beneath the eternal peace. The translated voice began, smooth as ever. Beloved humanity, recent events have caused dissonance. Dissonance is a danger to the harmony. It breeds fear where there should be trust. Let us reaffirm the foundation of our union. The Symphony Protocol is the conduit of our mutual understanding. To question it is to question peace itself. Therefore, a new directive is required to ensure continued stability. Jinwoo, in his locked lab, saw the raw data stream incoming. He saw the new glyph forming, larger, more complex than any before. It was not a simple primer. It was a command of immense power, designed to quell doubt forever. He didn't need to guess its intended translation. It would be something like submit or comply. It would be the end of their awakening. His fingers flew. He triggered the dead man's switch dot at that moment. Taiyang's repeater flared to life. But it did not broadcast the new, complex glyph. Instead, it broadcast a compilation. A jarring, rapid-fire sequence of the raw, ugly sounds they had archived, played directly over Kavar's translated speech. Krath, Volm, Yuld, Tend, Geese. The beautiful, reassuring words about harmony were drowned out by the harsh, meaningless cacophony of the Council's true voice. It was a screeching, brutal contrast. On the bridge, locked in her quarters, Hannah watched her screen. She saw Kavar's image falter, the first human-readable expression ever to touch its features. A flicker of pure, undiluted surprise. The translated speech stuttered, then continued, trying to overpower the noise. But the damage was irreparable. The curtain had been torn down, and the ugly little man behind it was revealed, shouting his gibberish. The repeater died, obliterated by Council countermeasures. Silence returned, filled only by Kavar's translated voice, which now felt hollow, a transparent lie. The new, powerful mandate was issued. The Symphony Protocol rendered it as a call for unity and quiet reflection. But it was too late. The memory of the two sounds, the soothing lie, and the grating truth was now side by side in the mind of every listening human. The cognitive dissonance was not a glitch this time. It was a presented fact. The protocol could translate the words, but it could not erase the shared experience of the deception. Hannah's door hissed open. Security bots flanked her. She was escorted to the main diplomatic chamber. On the large screen, Kavar's face loomed. The translated voice was cold now, all pretense of warmth gone. Commander Hana Kim, you are the source of the dissonance. You will be isolated. Your species will be re-evaluated. Hannah stood straight, facing the screen. She had no protocol in this chamber. It had been disconnected for security. She spoke in plain, unadorned Korean, knowing the council would hear it translated by their own means, but not caring. You have not spoken to us in 50 years, she said, her voice clear and cutting. You have sent noises. You have used our own minds as tools to build our own prison. The order was never abandon or submit or harmony. She turned to a secondary console, which Taiyang had rigged to play back a single file. She pressed a button. The raw, untranslated glyph for the unity and quiet reflection mandate filled the chamber. A low, threatening thrum of sound. The order was only ever this, Hana said, gesturing to the air where the ugly sound had been. A sound. A command to feel, not to think. You deceived us. You deceived everyone. She looked not at Kavar, but at the human officials in the room, their faces pale with shock and dawning horror. The symphony is not a protocol. It is a filter they put on our reality. They gave us the order in one word, one feeling at a time. And we built the cage around our souls. Kavar's image stared, unblinking. No translated response came. The direct, unfiltered confrontation had no precedent in their system. The communication line simply went dead. The screen went black dot in that blackness. Hannah felt not fear, but a terrifying, exhilarating freedom. The lie was broken. The true, silent galaxy awaited, no longer mediated by the comforting voice of their jailers. It would be harder. It would be dangerous. They would have to learn real communication with all its flaws and risks, but it would be theirs. Jinwoo and Taiyang were brought into the chamber, released by officials now questioning everything. They stood with Hana, looking at the dark screen. Outside, across the colonies, the silent doubt was hardening into loud, messy, human questions. The Galactic Council's beautiful deception was over. Humanity had finally heard the one-word order for what it was, a lie. And now they had chosen with many words and with great difficulty to say no.